It's Overreaction Monday, so of course there are some wild takes out there after just 2 weeks of football, but some of them actually might not be so wild. We're going to break down what's an overreaction and what's not. The Chiefs are actually 0-2. When teams start 0-2, their chances at the playoffs are slim to none. I think it'd be a crazy overreaction to say the Chiefs just aren't making the playoffs because of what history shows when you're 0-2. I don't think anyone's saying that though, but because people kind of trust those numbers and the trends, what actually happens year to year, people might be saying they're a borderline playoff team, they're a fringe playoff team, and I'd say that's still an overreaction for multiple reasons. They're missing their two best receivers, they played two good teams. Give them time to get going, they'll get there, especially when they get Rice and Worthy back, or just one of them back, that helps them big time. And they were very unlucky in this Eagles game. You know, Kelsey drops the ball. Let's just say he dropped the ball normally, hits the ground, but no, it's got a ricochet into a guy that's a little off in coverage, and they return it pretty far. If they score a touchdown there, I'd actually say their chances of winning that game are maybe better than 50%. Can't say a whole lot higher than 50%, but it felt like things were going their way. So anything in that fringe playoff team just because they're 0-2, overreaction. What's not an overreaction? What's a fair take right now? They're a contender, but they're not that top tier contender anymore. And that's not me saying they're for sure not winning the Super Bowl. They're for sure not a top tier contender when it's all said and done. I'm just saying it's a very fair take based on what's happening right now. That was their first regular season home loss in 2 years. At the same time of the last game, this game kind of just feeling off on both sides of the ball, just not right. So something isn't the same. Something is off. The running game has made a comeback in the NFL. You have to have a pretty damn good running game. They're not that dominant. They're not close to dominant there. They got some running backs, maybe underrated. The offensive line's still messy. It's so inconsistent. 1 second great, 1 second just terrible. The receivers are bad. Yes, they'll get their great receivers back, but Mahomes really has to carry. Even he missed the throw at the end of the game. The defense did enough in this game, but crucial situations just don't really feel fully the same. Missing some players compared to that last year's team who was starting. So they kind of got to do a lot of work to get back on track, but it would be an overreaction saying they're going to be one of those classic 0-2 teams. I think they're a little different, better than those. The Packers through 2 games dominated the Detroit Lions and the Washington Commanders, 2 really good teams. Through 2 games, they look like maybe the best team in football. It's just 2, and history shows the first couple weeks had lied to you, but I don't think it's an overreaction to say the Green Bay Packers are absolutely legit contenders. Their defense is playing out of this world. It's not just because of Micah Parsons, but Parsons brings a whole other element to it. Beating double teams, creating for his teammates, getting the big plays himself, and the defense is so well coached. Such a great game plan against Jaden Daniels as well. They're so sound in coverage. Everybody is playing team defense. And the offense, Jordan Love, to me, feels like a guy ahead of schedule so far this year. He missed a couple throws, also made some big-time throws in that last game. The running game is going to be there with Josh Jacobs. Matthew Golden hasn't done much, but he's getting separation downfield, which makes the defense a little, fear the offense a little bit more, and it opens things up for the rest of the weapons. I mean, Kraft is going off right now. The offensive line, they're down 2 key starters, doesn't matter because the guys that step in, their backups are really good. They're so good at coaching, developing. They got good players around them. So it's only been 2 games, but I think it's absolutely fair. Not an overreaction to say the Packers are legit contenders. The way the Broncos looked through 2 games, people may want to say they were overhyped. They were overrated this offseason when all that chatter, best defense, elite defense, this guy's improving, this team's improving, a sneaky, good playoff team. We heard a lot of it this offseason, so people may want to say, because in week 1 they were underwhelming. They're fortunate the Titans didn't really get calls. They got a lot of penalties, and the game still stayed close, obviously. And in week 2, they probably should have won. Very unlucky at the end. They probably did enough to win, but Bo Nix couldn't close out the end. He seems to roll right a lot and put himself on the sideline and limit his opportunities to make plays. That seems to be a bad tendency of his. And the defense just giving up so much against the Colts when they were supposed to be so good. So based off all that, you may want to say they're overrated. Maybe they will be, but I think it's way too early. They probably outplayed the Colts and should have won that game for most of it. They're very close to being 2-0. I think Sean Payton can get this team right. They have too much talent, but it's definitely possible. But what's not an overreaction to me is the Broncos' offseason was way too overhyped. I mean, everyone was like, I'm still surprised about it looking back on it. Like them signing a bunch of guys that, either are injured or always injured or not the same now that they've been injured a bunch, and everyone was calling an A++ home run signing, and there's still a lot of season left, right? Greenlaw could finally get in there. He could look good. I'm not saying they're not going to look good, but even if they look good, people were a little over the top with all that. It's going to like completely change the Broncos. I mean, yeah, again, Greenlaw finally got in and played last year, and the Niners wanted to put Devondre Campbell back in for him, and he refused to play because he got benched for a guy that was injured, and now Greenlaw hasn't played for the Broncos yet. Hufanga had one really good season, not the same after being injured. Is he going to hold up? Evan Ingram banged up in the first game, non-existent for the most part, really for the most part after that. These guys could play well the rest of the year. They can get going. It's just, there's a lot, and then they surprisingly take Barron in the first round. Good player, can't really get on the field right now, and the defense is giving up a lot, so you kind of question either the coaching or that pick. You thought maybe they would get a big-time starting running back, which they could use, but Sean Payton just loves, for some reason, having running backs he gives 6-7 carries to instead of actually just getting the better back. So I do question the offseason. Even if it gets better throughout the year, you still question it. People were a little overhyped about that. But I don't want to jump on right away now and say they were overhyped. They're not that good of a team. We're not going to get there yet. They probably should be 2-0. Very unlucky. They didn't get the call when they kicked the field goal. There was like 3 guys touching the long snapper, and the call goes against them after you feel like the game's over. Technically you could say the right call. You maybe got pushed in the long snapper. My problem is with ending a game like that is the opposing. So in this case, the Colts didn't really earn that. They kind of just got gifted, and that's a brutal way to end a game, win a game, lose a game, right? If a team earned a penalty because what they did, if anything, it's the opposite, because the Colts played for that 60-yard field goal, which was absurd, even though they called and played a good game the rest of the way. So Broncos, tough luck for them at the end of that one. The Steelers' defense has looked bad, just straight up bad through 2 games, and it's so hard to believe because their defense year in, year out is not only great but elite, and it's always good. It's just so hard to believe that just because 2 games that they're not good means they're just not going to be good all year. I'm not going to sit here and say they're not going to be good all year, but I think it's pretty evident they've definitely declined and they're no longer top tier. A lot of those guys that are still really good players their age are starting to take steps down. They absolutely cannot stop the run, which even really good defensive years for them, like a few years ago would be a good example, maybe 3 years ago. They had good defensive year, but they couldn't stop the run that year as well, so that's kind of back, and they're not that great against the pass. They kind of rely on big-time plays. Now, they were a little unlucky in this game in general because, the tipped interception in the end zone, just very unfortunate. And then the whole kickoff thing, the Seahawks score on the kickoff. And did he actually get firm possession of that ball, when he rolled out of bounds and lost the ball again? So, but not that 100% would have mattered. But they were very unlucky. Maybe they were lucky in week 1. But the defense, I'm not going to sit here and say it has absolute problems. It's bad. I don't think that's the case. But it's definitely not that same Steelers defense. It is not an overreaction to say that. A tough blow, a brutal blow to the Bengals, losing Joe Burrow for 3 months, roughly could be that long. That's way lengthier than I expected, but he has been injured in the past. So, especially Bengals fans, but everyone's got to be deflated about that, and people could be saying that season is over. And obviously, they're significantly worse without Joe Burrow. I didn't want to put that on here as not an overreaction because it's so obvious, but the season's definitely not over. Browning, while throwing 3, he's got to be better. While throwing 3 interceptions, they still won the game. The defense may be playing. It's not the greatest. It played a little bit better than expected. They still have those playmakers out there. They're 2-0 to start. When are the Bengals 2-0 to start? So they kind of just have to win some football games, and then Joe Burrow maybe there's a shot he doesn't come back, but they win a certain amount of games. He comes back. They might be in business. Are their chances lower of making the playoffs, winning the Super Bowl? Yeah, of course, but the season absolutely isn't over. Just remember, they won a game just now when things did not go their way, obviously with the Burrow injury, but they start down. They're not even looking good with him in, honestly, and 3 interceptions at pretty brutal times. They still won the game, and they're actually 2-0. They're 2-0. The Bengals are never 2-0 at the start of the year, so there's some positivity there. Do not throw in the towel. The Falcons' defense is turning heads right now. A pretty good outing in week 1 against the Bucs and a dominant outing on Sunday Night Football against the Vikings. A great win for the Atlanta Falcons. And they look that defense looks really good, looks maybe elite, and people really got their eyes on them. They're talking about that Falcons defense so much right now. I'd say it'd be an overreaction to say they're top tier or elite on defense. I think in the matter of time, them playing, better competition, or the next time they play the Bucs, I think that was more of just week one things. I think, I'm not going to say it's going to come back down to earth. That's the not an overreaction. This is a much improved defense. Like we said, could happen once they hire Jeff Ulbrich. Just defensive coaching. I've said it for years and years and years. Defensive coaching is the most important part of that defense. Offense, it's the actual quarterback, the actual offensive line. And then play calling and offensive coaching is up there, obviously. But for defense, coaching, the most important. They got a good one in Jeff Ulbrich, so that instantly made that defense better. And now they add a bunch of young talent to the defense throughout the draft. The Diablo looks really solid as well. I was kind of questioning that signing because it canceled out the Drew Dahlman compensatory pick that they would have gotten next year, obviously. So Diablo looking good, looking like another Jamian Sherwood for Jeff Ulbrich. So fantastic. The defense looks awesome. It's very, very much improved. It's got upside because it's so young, but I do think they got the Panthers this week. It might look elite again. The Vikings, young quarterback that was, just off, and they have their second string center in there, can't snap the ball. They're down to a third left tackle. The defense still would have played well, I think, for the Falcons. It's just maybe kind of the situation was kind of simplified for them and then kind of made them look elite. But they're going to be a big-time defense for years to come. The playmakers they added in the back end, the Falcons' defense is going places for sure. I think it's just a little early to be saying, it's a top tier, one of the best defenses, even statistically it's up there right now. I think it's a little much, pump the brakes right now, but it's going to be a good defense this year. Colts are 2-0, one of the better teams, at least on paper, in the AFC right now. So people calling them the AFC South favorites, or technically, by the numbers, they're a top team in the AFC. I do think that'd be a little bit of an overreaction. They definitely could win the South. They're going to battle the Texans for sure. I still feel like we'll see how the Texans play tonight, I suppose, but I still feel like that's the team to beat. Even though the Colts definitely have a shot to win it. They did kind of get lucky at the end of that against the Broncos. They didn't really earn the 15-yard penalty to get that. They were losing the entire game, but they impressed. They can run the ball. They can throw the ball. Daniel Jones is playing well. That's looking like the right choice to pick. I know a lot of the fans were kind of throwing in the towel when they didn't pick Anthony Richardson, so I thought maybe that was an overreaction. Daniel Jones, the right choice. It's proving to be. Luana Romo's got the defense playing a little bit better. There was a stretch where they were struggling a little bit, but they figured something out down the stretch there. But what is not an overreaction is the Colts are way better than people thought. Look at every year. There's a team that starts 2-0, a surprising team. Last year being, the Saints, and people wanted to go after week 2. They're way better than everyone thought. And I was like, no, I think this is early season stuff. And it ended up being the case. Like, the Saints actually weren't that good. I don't think the Colts are that team. I think they're actually a lot better than people thought this year. Are they going to be this top AFC team throughout the year just winning and they can beat anyone? I don't think it's a little early to say that, so I'd say that'd be an overreaction. The Dolphins are a disaster right now. To say they need to clean house and rebuild, I don't think that's an overreaction. I think that's what needs to happen given their roster and given their financial situation. They did a poor job building this roster first off, and they've been very unlucky with injuries over the years, but the offensive line just isn't there. There's a Tua problem right now. There's a Tyreek Hill problem right now. They have weapons. They could use better weapons. They need a much better offensive line. They have to find that quarterback of the future. They do. Even if Tua, I'm not saying like he needs to go. He can't be the starting quarterback next year. Not necessarily saying that. They got to find that quarterback of the future. The only thing they have going for them on defense is the defensive line, but you can't even trust that group to stay healthy, right? And after that, they need better talent from top, linebacker to corner to safety, even though they have Fitzpatrick. Mike McDaniel, the players aren't on his side. He's been a mess, even in the good moments, even in good winning games. There's been, why isn't he running the ball more? He's passing when he should run. He's running when we should pass. The team doesn't look prepared. It's a mess right now. They gotta clear house. They gotta clean house. They gotta start, building up this roster and not relying on stars, patch up and this roster here and there carrying the team. It's not working anymore. It's absolutely not working. It's a game that it felt like it's the Patriots, they're going to lose again. Oh my God, they're in the driver's seat. They're going to win this game. And they kind of let it slip away. Thought Achane scored on that one, that big the big play, and then it got, obviously he stepped out, so that's kind of a gut punch as well. But Tua just making mistake after mistake, and Tyreek Hill situation isn't helping, and it's bad. But the way this, and I'm not saying they're done. They're going to lose every game this year. I mean, Thursday night's going to be tough. They could still possibly win 7, 8, 9, 10 games. I don't think so, but they could. I'm not going to sit here and say zero chance. But where is that going to get them? If they somehow do get in the playoffs, they're going to lose right away because there's other teams that are better, and you just do not trust this team in that type of game. And they're just still they're probably in a worse spot than having a big time pick. So I think at the end of this year, they got to decide. They got to make that decision and focus more on the future and not just stay middle of the pack, where you could argue is the worst place to be in sports. The Cowboys take Brian Schottenheimer is just a much better hire than everyone thought. Everyone ripped them for that one, and I kind of thought at the time people were a little too hard on that, but I'm going to say it's only 2 weeks in. Maybe they got a little lucky. They got a lot of lucky maybe against the Giants, and they got outplayed for a bit of that game. Maybe fortunate the Giants got a lot of penalties, but I'm going to say it's not an overreaction. I think that hire's solid, just the way the offense got going without Dak at the end of last year against some quality teams. They were somewhat of like they weren't a pushover team for the most part. That was a sign to me, like, you got to bring this guy back. You can't start from scratch with the offense, and there's some good signs once they get fully healthy, and that's showing right now. The offense was lights out for most of the Eagles game against the Eagles, and it was lights out the entire Giants game and that's going against a really good defensive line too, don't forget. When they needed to make a play, when they needed to get an extra yard or a big play, big yardage, they got it. And you hear Schottenheimer with the team at the end of the game, that he's got that team playing for him. Like he's got them playing together. So I really like the vibes. For the Cowboys, got to fix the defense. They're not going to get, they can't rely on the luck maybe that they got in that game. They were unlucky at times as well. They got to fix the defense. They got to stay healthy, keep going. So this is not me saying like, oh my God, they're going to be a legit contender with Schottenheimer. Not the case. Not what I'm saying. But I do think that was and is maybe proving to be a much better, significant higher than people thought. I think the vibes are good with that team right now, which a lot of time in the recent past, it really hasn't felt like that. Quick take for the Niners, and that's they're a legit threat if they're healthy. It's a big if, but even when they're not healthy right now, they're 2-0. They can still make plays on offense no matter who's in there. They're definitely going to make plays on defense. And this offseason, people really I noticed that in the comments, really wanted to knock the Niners. Like, they're done. They're not a good team anymore, but they're a good team right now while they are more beat up than any other team. There's other teams that surprisingly already have injuries, and they're maybe losing because of that. The Niners are still finding ways to win football games. So this is a better, in general, a better team than people think. Better team than what people want to give them credit for. And if they're healthy, you actually should watch out for the San Francisco 49ers, but they got to get healthy. I feel like they will at some point. Will they stay healthy? That is the question. The Bears, once again, feel like a disaster right now. I mean, they blew a game in week 1, and that was to the Vikings, who, looking at them in week 2, that loss feels and looks even worse for the Chicago Bears. And then in week 2, they give up 52 points and get their ass kicked to the Detroit Lions, a team that essentially scored 6 in week 1. They score at the end of the game. So it's just a really, really bad look. The offense is bad off the script. The defense is still bad. There's no fixes there. People thought it would be all better, all fixed without Eberflus and with Dennis Allen in there. There's still a lot of work to do. The defensive line for sure isn't there, and they are a little banged up in the secondary as well. It just looks awful right now across the board. Based on the 2 weeks, it looks like they might be one of the worst teams in football. I'm just not going to believe that's the case until the end of the year, and maybe they actually are. Then we'll say it. I'm not going to sit here and say they're a good team at all, but I mean, they played a really good Vikings defense, and the Vikings are questionable right now. And then they played the Lions are still, no matter what happened in week 1, they played the Packers, look at the best team in football. In Detroit, the Lions bounce back after losses is what they do. So they caught the Lions at the worst possible time. New coach, new everything, still a developing quarterback. Maybe it's one of those things that just needs time. So I'm at the end of the year, right now, it feels like they're one of the worst teams. I don't think they're actually one of the worst teams when it's all said and done. We will see. But it's going to take a lot longer than everyone thought. There were some people talking, and it's still early in the season. Maybe they figure it out, go on that run, sneak into the playoffs. I'm not saying 0% chance, but people are saying it's going to be a wild card team. I mean, Caleb Williams is going to be that guy. We thought he was going to be unreal. Ben Johnson's going to be unreal, going to look like that Lions Ben Johnson. It was a little too much too soon. It's going to take time because, I mean, first Ben Johnson's got to get this team right. Not only the current plays that are out there, but it's not really, it doesn't fit the Lions Ben Johnson team. Like, Caleb Williams is so far from Jared Goff, like the style of play, the tendencies. There's just so much to fix there. The offensive line isn't the same. The running game isn't the same. I mean, the weapons look all right. Roma Dunze looks pretty good. The defense isn't the same. So it's going to take more time to coach these guys up and get them prepared, get them right, get the fourth downs, for an example, aren't the same. As that's totally night and day different from the Lions. It's going to take time for that. It's also going to take time to actually build the roster for Ben Johnson football, and it's something people kind of, didn't realize heading into the season. The Giants dropped to 0-2. The Rush should be bench talk was already starting after week 1. I thought that's all we heard about. I thought it was nonsense. And it's still going to happen, believe it or not. But they finally let him, try to push the ball downfield, just try to make plays. And he makes big plays. I know he threw an interception at the end. I don't know if there was miscommunications. That was bad. But obviously, and I like Jackson Dart. Love the future. Overreaction is just continuing to say Russell Wilson should be benched, but what's not an overreaction is Daboll should have been should get shit canned. He should have got shit canned yesterday, last year, before this year at least. And even though they competed with the Cowboys, maybe should have beat the Cowboys, maybe got unlucky, some things that they really fully couldn't control. This team is so undisciplined. The decisions are still brutal. I mean, I'm watching Brian Daboll throughout the game, and I'm like, this guy isn't a head coach. He's not a head coach. And the decision to not kick the field goal on a fourth down when you're kicking it all game. Like, it's either do it or you're not, or don't, right? You're deciding in one random situation, we're not going to win this game off field goals. We're going to go for it here. And that ended up biting them in the ass. And all of a sudden they couldn't get offense going in overtime when they had chances and they were moving the ball. A field goal would have won the game. Go get a field goal. And there was one point where they threw the ball 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage to Singletary. What is that play call? So I don't know. And the defensive coaching wasn't great either. But coaching staff's the main problem right now. It's the game the Giants should have won. So that's not an overreaction. He should have been gone yesterday. And by yesterday, I mean he should have been gone before this year, but probably before that even. The Jags with an all-timer, a brutal loss to the Cincinnati Bengals. It makes me say it's hard to trust the Jags. If they can't win that one, it's hard to trust the Jags this year. I don't think that's an overreaction at all. It's not me saying they stink, their season's over, they're done, I'm not going to pick them the rest of the year. Not what I'm saying. That is a game you absolutely win. You absolutely have to win, and it's one of those that makes you go, if you can't win that one, which ones are you going to win? They're going to win other games, but which ones could I trust you to for sure win if you can't win that game right there? People may say it's a worse loss if you have like a 3-touchdown lead and you blow it. I don't know. That's a pretty bad one. They're outplaying the Bengals with Joe Burrow in there. They're winning, and then Joe Burrow goes down. It's a gift for the Jags. There's some luck there. They're going to win the game. Browning comes in. He's a decent backup quarterback. He throws 3 interceptions at almost about the worst possible times. Not the number one worst time. It would have been at the very end of the game when they had the Bengals were about to score. They did score. But 3 interceptions at brutal times. Things going the Jags' way. Star quarterback out for the Bengals. They have him outmatched. They have him outplayed. And you lose this football game. And on top of it, the defense lets them drive the whole field and go and win the football game. They got pushed back from the 1-yard line. They still get there. They win the football game. I mean, this game was made for the Jags to walk away with this victory. It's just hard. And then you got Liam Cohen and Trevor Lawrence, kind of the whole thing with them at the end there. It's going to be tough for me, a lot of us, to trust the Jacksonville Jaguars because of that game right there. That's one. It's a gut punch. It's deflating. You got to win that football game. That is a brutal, brutal loss for Jacksonville. The Panthers once again got completely outplayed, but there was life at the end of the game where maybe it kind of felt like they had some sort of chance. They were coming back, and the offense actually got rolling. The defense was making stops. So you may go, hey, maybe they turned the corner. Maybe they figured it out going forward. They fixed some issues. I think it's an overreaction. The Cardinals kind of did the same thing against the Saints. They were, they probably should have just pounded the football, letting Kyler running around and throw the ball while he's getting hit like a madman. It's just sometimes the Cardinals and Kyler, they do those things, and but I guess it's positive the Panthers were able to move the ball a little bit more, but there's some issues in there. They're beat up on the offensive line. Bryce Young holding the ball a little too long. Just at times he looks okay. At times it's pretty bad. Just not making enough plays, not looking good enough. And Ted McMillan's got to carry the receiver unit. Of course, they could get better like they did last year as the year goes on. Because I think Dave Canales is a decent coach. I like to think he's a good coach, and they're going to get Coker back. So not saying they're doomed or anything like that. It's just they got a lot of work to do still, and I feel somewhat of they're not stage one of rebuild, but they're in a situation where if Bryce Young keeps playing like this, like, are we going to need a quarterback? Offensive line's supposed to be good. It's a little banged up. Do they have questions there? Do we need more receivers? The defense, we got some pieces here and there, but man, we need more guys in the secondary. We need much better linebackers. We need far better edge rushers. We need someone else to help Derek Brown stop the run. They did actually stop the run a little bit better than I expect them to in this game. That's not fixed, though. The major issues are absolutely not fixed, even if it may look like it, even with the loss. But they're still in a weird situation throughout the rest of the year, but in the offseason as well, which is obviously very unfortunate. And I question some of the decisions the front office has made with building this roster. Some wild, unexpected news. J.J. McCarthy will not be the Vikings starting quarterback this week due to an ankle injury. Carson Wentz will be the starting quarterback against the Bengals. This is already being decided and announced on Monday. So a couple takes that I don't think are overreactions here. I got to be very careful with this because people are going to take this the wrong way. But I do think the statement of McCarthy's situation is closer to a benching than a full-blown serious injury. Now, that's not me saying he got flat out benched. They're making up an injury. Not what I'm saying. He was getting taped up in the game. You could see when he got a little banged up. They did keep him in the whole rest of the game. What I think is the Vikings got a quarterback that's struggling, and he has a little bit of an ankle injury that maybe he could try to see if he could play on this week, and they saw an opportunity. Let's take a look at Carson Wentz. Quarterback play and other things, injuries in the offense line, they're holding back the offense right now. Kevin O'Connell's, especially regular season offense, is always really productive. This is just new. This is different. So they saw an opportunity. Let's take a look at Wentz. While he's not 100%, there is a little bit of an injury in there. If Wentz looks good, I do think he will keep the job. Some people aren't going to agree with that. If he looks, then McCarthy's 100%. Let's give him a go again. Why not? This was our guy. So I think Carson Wentz has to look. I don't think he's guaranteed to keep the job. He has to look pretty decent. Obviously, they have to win some football games, which is possible. Maybe it's only one game, and they got to go overseas after this game. But I think it's the Vikings saying, we have an opportunity here to do something, to know something for sure. Let's do it. So I'm not saying they're faking an injury, anything like that. And signs of that are, not just them doing this or not just McCarthy struggling, holding back the offense. They kept him in the game. The game was over on that last drive. They threw him back in there. He threw a bad interception. If he was really kind of banged up, I guess he could have woke up a lot more injured. I don't know, but questionable. But the main thing, to decide that today, not even halfway through the day, he's not playing. Carson Wentz is the guy. We're not going to see how he is. We're going to go from there. I think that's a little crazy. And also, it's early, but I already think it's the Vikings made the wrong decision this offseason. And it's not me saying McCarthy's bad, for sure bad, never going to be good. Not saying that. Any quarterback could get. He's played 2 games. He's had now multiple injuries. That's the other thing there, too, but we'll get to it. Not what I'm saying, obviously. I think that multiple things here. They built a contending roster. They spent a lot of future money. That rest of the roster is legit. How long are some of these guys going to be around for? Harrison Smith hasn't played yet. He's probably retiring after this year. Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen, these guys that they added, they spent money on. How long are they going to be around for? How long is Andrew Van Ginkel be around for? I mean, he's still playing at a very high level. He was out this week with an injury. So it's a possible short-term contending roster, and they chose a young rebuild type quarterback. That's already a questionable decision, and he was injured all last year. You don't even know if he can stay healthy, and now there's another injury apparently that's popped up. So it's looking more and more like, and I thought at the time, I thought, I want McCarthy to work out. She's still got a shot to work out. Just, it can't hurt to bring a veteran back or get a different veteran. Darnold, Daniel Jones, Aaron Rodgers was thrown out there, not necessarily saying they for sure should have done this one or that one. But it can't hurt. You built the rest of the roster. Why ignore the quarterback position? Get a veteran quarterback in case McCarthy's not ready, in case he's not healthy again, because his only chance in the NFL, he wasn't healthy. So they were so serious about the rest of the roster and not that position. So I do think they made the wrong decision. And again, McCarthy could come back in healthy and play good because there's so much football season left and he can get better. He's a young, high upside first-round quarterback for a reason. So I'm not saying he's bad or he can't be good. I just still think either way, that was a very questionable approach to building the team in the offseason. They built the entire team and kind of ignored that position. I guess they offered some other quarterbacks to come back, very cheap deals. So we'll see. But this is very interesting situation. Some shocking news, obviously. And I do think it's the Vikings kind of jumping on an opportunity while they have that opportunity. So people will probably debate that. But at the end of the day, again, it doesn't help McCarthy that some key offensive linemen were out. They're down to the third string left tackle. But at the end of the day, quarterbacks have to make plays. And he just wasn't making plays, making the wrong plays. For a quarter, again, he was clutch against the Bears. But that was really it. And Bears gave up 52 points this week. So tough situation, especially because McCarthy has upside and you want him to kind of try to hit that upside. Do the Vikings have time for that? Again, that brings up that debate once again. Pretty wild news and situation here in Minnesota. There's a lot of takes out there that may or may not be overreactions when it comes to the Washington Commanders after their tough loss against the Packers on Thursday Night Football. A lot of people looking at last year. They kind of got lucky in some games down the stretch in the regular season, and people will keep talking about that right now. Oh, it was kind of fluky last year. They're really not that good. They can't play. They're a good team, but they can't play with the contenders like the Packers or the other top dogs like the Eagles. I think that all of that, what I just said, that people are definitely thinking and saying, I think it's an overreaction. This is too good of a football team, too well coached a football team. You have too good of a quarterback. He's a little banged up right now. It might be Mariota this week. I think they can win a football game or two at Mariota. We'll see. But they can win in so many different ways, in my opinion. I'm not saying they're a top-tier contender. No one's claiming that. People are getting on them a little bit too much because the disappointing outing against the Packers on Thursday night. Now, it sure does feel like the game plan is out on the Cliff Kingsbury. I'll mainly say Cliff Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels offense, which shouldn't really be a surprise for multiple reasons. It happened with Kyler and Cliff, and they couldn't, when teams figured out how to game plan for that, they went south. They couldn't overcome the game plan. Something that people don't realize. Everybody in the NFL, every offense, every coordinator, eventually there is a proper game plan for them. For everybody. The great ones overcome it. You know, there's no, like Mahomes and the Chiefs, for an example. There's a plan. There's a proper plan for them, but can you actually stop it? And that'll be the big question for Cliff Kingsbury, Jaden Daniels. Are they just too good? Daniels might be, right? And they can just overcome it and still compete against these good teams, even if the game plan is there. But the game plan's out after all that film last year, and teams just kind of figuring, some teams playing them for the second time, for the first time, with film, with a proper game plan. And looking at it this week against the Packers, I mean, they did a phenomenal job frustrating Jaden Daniels, keeping him in the pocket, just not letting him get outside. They showed that it's possible to spy him at the same time having these guys covered up downfield. Because they really only have one. They have other guys that can make plays downfield, don't get me wrong, but it's really only Scary Terry down the field. So, and the Packers might have elite top-tier defense. They might just be that good. So, could be just that. But there is a proper game plan already out there, and now more so out there. The question will be, when healthy, of course, we'll see what happens with Daniels. Can they overcome it? The great ones do. Only the great ones do. Some teams could stay good if they don't, if they don't fully consistently over. We'll see. We're going to wait and see if this is another. I don't think so, but is it another Cliff Kyler situation? I think they're better than that. But in another not an overreaction, we kind of had multiple. For another not an overreaction, the Commanders ignoring the edge position, the D-line, I could even say, this offseason will backfire. That's not an overreaction. It kind of already did. I mean, they built up the offense so good, and you're kind of waiting. Are they going to make this defense better? Are they going to make this defense better? They don't do it. Yes, Dan Quinn's going to make the defense play better than they actually are on paper. The corners look pretty damn good on paper. They get a little grabby sometimes. They got quite a few guys that do that. They have other good players in other positions. Deron Payne, the linebackers. I think Wagner's a little overrated, if you ask me. Still a good player, phenomenal career Hall of Famer. But safeties maybe a little better than they got to play better, but maybe a little underrated, whatever. But they ignored that defense too much. They're not getting enough pressure. The Packers were missing two starting offensive linemen. When teams miss off, look at the Vikings for an example on Sunday Night Football. When they miss offensive linemen, it's a disaster 98% of the time. The Packers got good backups, yeah, but for them to I mean, they looked insane still. They didn't lose a step, and their star right tackle, Zach Tom, was out. That's crazy. So that is props to the Packers for their depth, their roster management, their developing, their coaching to be able to prepare guys. Phenomenal. But that is a knock on the Washington Commanders, how you cannot take advantage, how it was a non-factor. Of course, the Commanders' offense line doesn't feel like it's at full strength yet either, something else to keep in mind. But interesting team with this video. Still think it's a legit team. Unfortunate with Daniels. Yeah, he was limping a little bit. We'll see what happens there. But it's still a legit team here. Just a rough outing in week 2. But that is going to wrap up this video. Kind of a fun idea that I want to jump on and do. So let me know your guys' thoughts if you have more for other teams. I couldn't get to every single team. But next up are week 3 videos. I'm pumped for that. So that you guys can join us for all of those different videos, picks, predictions, bets, power rankings, and more. Like, subscribe, turn on notifications on. Follow us on X. Very important. It's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.